am excited and enthused and excited to be enthused. Sorry, that's way too much energy too early in this video. I'm excited today because I am thoroughly and utterly confused. And I'm confused because I just had a fantastic time with my friends, the Mormons. I'm sorry, the Latter-day Saints, LDS, the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, Incorporated, inaugurated. There's like a preposition in there that doesn't seem like it should be there. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like, is he only the Christ to the Latter-day Saints? Is it a different Christ? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of Atheist Church Audit. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist, and I'm about to explain my confusion. I'm confused because last time I met with the Mormons, I had a very, very bad time. Pain, so much pain. I would call it a morgue, but that would be an insult to the dead. I've been to funerals that were happier. I would rather get a prostate exam with a bucket of nails than do that again. I think that my last Mormon video was probably the most negative review I have ever given a church. If you'll recall, I went to a fast and testimony Sunday, and up until this point, this is the only exposure that I've had to being in an LDS ward. And everything I said in that video, I'm gonna stand by it. The atmosphere there was so sad and so depressing that I couldn't recommend that anyone go there. It was one of the few times where I was like, sound the alarm, please get these people out of here. This is really, really, really bad. But I knew that that couldn't be all that Mormonism is, or else everyone would have left by now. Hopefully. I feel like the parts of religion that tend to get most publicized are the really, really negative portions.
And don't you ever say I did.
Everyone knows about the Catholic pedophile scandal. Everyone knows about Muhammad marrying a 9-year-old. And everyone knows that if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're supposed to just let your friends bleed out on an operating table. So those are the negative things that everyone knows about, and they're very widely publicized. But I'm really interested in why people come to a religion in the first place. What was it about it that was appealing to you? What was beautiful about it? What was good about it? What was the sales pitch that made you say, gosh, I think this is worth investing my entire life into? And I'm so glad, because today I got to see a glimpse of that. Now, if you're new here, and I will assume that you are, I am not smart. I am an idiot. I'm a raging, incompetent idiot. And I don't want to bullshit you. I don't want to bullshit anyone and, read a Wikipedia article and regurgitate that information into a very sophisticated and polished and professional looking YouTube video and trick you all into thinking that I'm smarter than I am. Instead, this is me cataloging my experiences, going to different churches, exploring different denominations and weird religious movements, and just cataloging my thoughts and opinions as they change over time. So with all that being said, let's set the stage. This is a very exciting time for Mormons and Mormonism. The sitting president of the LDS Church has just turned 100 years old.
I do not know why the Lord has allowed me to live this long.
Boys over at Ward Radio are gaining steam and doing a lot of stuff. Mormon TikTok mommy vloggers are dominating Instagram. And Nemo the Mormon was just excommunicated. What the f***, y'all? Nemo, if you're watching this, you're my hero. Please be my friend. What do I know about Mormonism right now? I have not read the Book of Mormon. I have not read the Pearl of Great Price. I have not read the Doctrines and Covenants. But I have read the Bible, and I've read a little bit about Joseph Smith. I've read 1 or 2 biographies about him. And even though this is my 3rd visit to the Mormons, I went to 2 fast and testimony Sundays, I've spent very little time in actual LDS wards, and I've spent a lot of time talking to LDS missionaries.
Hello, it's us.
So I'll say this from the get-go, that I actually really like Mormonism. Don't just scream. As with any faith, any religion, there's parts and portions of it that I would change if I could. If I were to throw them all in a crock pot and, make my own custom religion, there would be things that I would change and alter about it. But the gist of it, right? The cosmology, the lore, I think is really interesting and really cool, especially in Mormonism. Yeah, James White once called Mormonism American Gnosticism, and I know that he meant that to be antagonistic, but as somebody who's really into Gnosticism, that was kind of the perfect sales pitch. It's almost kind of like sad to me because I feel like in common LDS parlance, it's sort of like, oh, you know, if we're going to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with people, you have to keep kind of the more interesting stuff on the back burner. You can't talk about that stuff too soon because it might scare them away. But I'm over here like, dude, I want to hear more about, you know, the multiple worlds and man becoming God and all of this stuff. I think it's cool. Even like the revelations of Joseph Smith and you know, the idea of Jesus having a second ministry in the Americas. I'm like fascinated by the concept. I think it's really interesting. So it thoroughly bummed me out and broke my heart to see a religious community that was so sad the last time I went to a ward. So I've been wanting to go back to give them a second chance, and I've been sitting on it for a few months now, waiting for a good opportunity. But then a couple weeks ago, I was in Chicago for my birthday.
I need a change, brother.
And a Mormon missionary texts me just totally out of the blue. If you ever talk to Mormon missionaries and they get your information, they put that name on basically a rap sheet, and forevermore, they will try to reach out to you unless you explicitly tell them to not to. But I'm crazy, and I like learning about people and ideas and religions, so I just keep saying yes. Oh gosh. So I talked to these missionaries. First they invited me to a Bible study, then they invited me to their ward. So the Bible study that I went to, it was on like a Tuesday night, and it was literally on the campus of a local college here. And so it was a lot of young Mormons, a lot of young missionaries. And that alone was already like a better vibe than the all ages ward that I went to. So it was already cool hanging out with, you know, like young college age kids. And then they subsequently invited me to a young adult ward. So this young adult ward was filled with young adults. I think the cutoff age is like 35-ish. So it was entirely people who were like 18 to 35, and then a few like supervisors, chaperones, if you will. So I don't know the history of this or how it became implemented, but my hunch, my sneaking suspicion is that church leaders were like, hey, we need young people to be able to reproduce, so let's all shove them in a church together. And I bet it's working. I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that might be the meta. That might just be like the best way to play the game. Incentivize people to go to church for love, and then by the time that they're actively like, you know, in love and married, then they just keep going out of habit, right? Their neuroplasticity is already just shot. And so they've built in the muscle memory and they just keep going for forever. That's going to be my new recommendation to pastors. They want to know how to have, you know, better retention. You just need to have an alternative to Tinder, man. Maybe that's why I left Christianity. There weren't enough cute girls at my church. They all got pregnant. Not by me. But it was true. It was really sad. We lived in a very rural community. So yeah, I mean, it was a really cool vibe. A lot of young, energetic faces, a lot of, you know, passionate people who were happy to be there. It was a much better vibe than the last ward that I went to. As an aside, I heard through the grapevine that community was ravaged by a pretty bad scandal, which I kind of suspected when I was there. It was like something was so off that, you know, it just, yeah. Okay, so the church today, church service today, the Mormon church ward temple service today. I'm not gonna lie, this was exceptional. And I was there for 5 hours. I'll explain why I was there so long in a minute, but yeah, overall just, I wanna stress how good this was. Because I was just a visitor, I'm what they consider an investigator. I'm here investigating the ins and outs of the Mormon faith, which I'm not sure if that's descriptive of all people who, you know, get dragged into a Mormon church, but for me, it's incredibly accurate. So I take a seat next to a couple of female missionaries. They weren't the ones who invited me, but I recognized them from the Bible study, and I sat and we sang some hymns. We take communion, which in the Mormon faith, you're allowed to do as a non-Mormon. So, you know, the hymns were, you know, not the craziest thing in the world, but still, again, a step up from the Kingdom Hall. I've done enough, like, you know, real world investigating of the Jehovah's Witnesses now, and I know that they don't tend to watch these videos. So they've just become the butt of every single one of my jokes, and I'm just gonna keep it that way. It's etched in stone now. The previous ward that I went to, it was a little bit smaller, and it was substantially more hideous than this one. Don't get me wrong, this one was still not pretty, but it was almost passable. The last one, the sanctuary had no windows. It was entirely boxed in, and so it was just this harsh fluorescent lighting that made you feel like you were in an insane asylum. This one actually had some windows. It was a little bit more cozy. The pews were, tolerable. It was still, kind of like ugly 70s vibes, but at least it wasn't a Kingdom Hall. So then after the hymns, they asked all the new visitors to stand up and say who they were, where they were from, and whether they were a cat or a dog person. Cutesy little icebreaker. So, of course, me being quirky and different and not like other girls, I stood up and I said, hey, my name's Jared, I'm from Raleigh, and cats and dogs, I like dinosaurs. And boy howdy, those people were just over the moon about my silly little joke. So for those who have never been inside of a Mormon church, it's very similar to kind of like a Methodist vibe because they were sprouted in the same era, right? And a lot of the churchiness feels very similar. Where it kind of deviates, and again, James White has talked about this a lot, is that there's a lot of like shared vocabulary with Mormons and Protestants, but then that vocabulary within Mormonism has a wildly different definition. Or if it's not radically different, it's wildly more expansive. So Christians, obviously, have the Bible. Mormons, in addition to that, have as scripture the Old and New Testaments, King James Version, and they also have the Book of Mormon, and they also have the Pearl of Great Price, and they also have the Doctrines and Covenants. And altogether, it is a huge corpus of literature. So the entirety of the Harry Potter series, all however many books are in the series, comes out to about 1 million words. The entirety of the Bible, Old and New Testaments, are already 700,000 words. So like, it's a pretty huge undertaking to read the Bible. And so in addition to that, you got 3 other books that you gotta read, woof. But I say all that to say that the way that Mormons will interpret theology is just different, right? Because, in the same way that Christians read the New Testament into the Old Testament, Mormons will also read the Book of Mormon into the New Testament, and they'll read the Pearl of Great Price into the Old Testament. So for Protestants, where the Ark of the Covenant becomes symbolic of the womb of Mary, the Mormons will, actually, I haven't gotten that far yet. I need to do some more reading. But they would make similar allegories. So the way that this plays out is you'll be, in a Bible study, like I was, and they'll be talking about, some obscure Old Testament figure, and they'll bring up like Samson. And you'll be like going through the story, and you're nodding your head, and it's like, yeah, I've heard this in Sunday school. And then somebody chimes in and they're like, oh, but were they a part of the Aaronic priesthood or the Melchizedek priesthood? And it's one of those that just kind of like, it's almost jarring, being like, wait, what? Like they introduced like this entirely new angle to the story that you're not used to hearing as a Protestant. And it's really interesting. So with the churchiness that I mentioned, it's similar to, a Methodist feel. What I mean by that is like the customs and the ordinances. So for example, the hymns, they feel and sound like Methodist hymns. There's an organ up at the front, and that's the only instrument you'll find here. And I have to, I'm gonna keep making comparisons to the Jehovah's Witnesses because they will forever be on my mind now. The way that they do it here, right? The way that the Mormons do their music, just with an organ and voices, that is so much more preferable to the CD that they put in at the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like, on paper, it should be better, but it's just worse in every conceivable way. So yeah, this was, marginally better. But then after the hymn, they had a little choir come up and do like a solo piece. And it wasn't like earth-shattering, but it was really nice. They had some kind of like call and response, kind of like polyrhythmic things going on, where like the men would sing one part and the women would sing another part, and they kind of ebbed and flowed together. And it was really pretty. And then that led into the sermon. And I gotta be honest, it was pretty good. All right, we're just gonna roll with it. I'm just gonna keep making the comparison between the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. Gosh, the
JW
talks were always just about, what you should do. And it was just like, 45 minutes of finger wagging. And like, yeah, there was like a smiley demeanor to it, but it was just really unnerving and like really simplistic. This sermon, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, was preached by an unpaid volunteer, and it was really solid. The gentleman who gave the sermon was actually a history professor at the local university, and it just seemed like he had seen some stuff, and his sermon kind of echoed that. It was all about discipleship and how the core of discipleship is love. And it was just really good. It was really well-rounded. I mean, he's a college professor, right? So he's probably a good speaker already. But just the heart of the message felt really sincere. But the emphasis of his sermon that I feel like I rarely hear in Jehovah's Witnesses circles is how the whole purpose of discipleship is about love. Jehovah's Witnesses will talk about love, but it's much more about like obedience and, doing the Bible principle thing. And needless to say, I like that a lot less than stressing how love is at the root of it all. So again, I stayed at this church for 5 hours. The service wasn't very long, but after the service, there was Sunday school. And so between the service and Sunday school, I, shook hands with all of the elders and the sisters who I'd been talking to at the Bible study, and then sat in for like an hour, 15-ish minutes Sunday school. And, it wasn't anything extraordinary, but it was fine. So then after the Bible study, after Sunday school, they had like a ice cream social. And so we all gathered in the gym, the basketball court. What do they call it? Like the social center or something like that. And I sat with a group of new acquaintances and, ate ice cream. And they had like little icebreaker cards on the table, which, roll my eyes at, but at the same time, was actually kind of endearing, and I was grateful that I got to, talk to a handful of people at my table. Now, I do want to offer a piece of clarification. With the last church, the last ward that I blasted really, really heavily, it wasn't that the people were mean, and it wasn't that the people were sad, at least not to me. It was that the atmosphere in the room was sad. It was that the atmosphere at that ward was just really melancholy. Those people, whenever they shook my hand and smiled at me and, told me how grateful that they were that I came, they were actually very lovely and very wonderful to talk to. And here, it was the same thing, where I got to talk to a whole bunch of people. The vast majority of them were young people because it was a young adults ward, and it was a good time. I had a lot of fun. Another distinction that I have to make with the Jehovah's Witnesses is that the Jehovah's Witnesses have what's called the new personality. They are actively trying to conform you to this very specific mold of a human being. And I have to say that the ward that I was in today seemed to have a ton of personality diversity. There's also a decent bit of like regular diversity, but specifically like the type of person that was there. It seemed like it was pretty far-reaching, surprisingly. Now, even in Protestant circles, right? If you go to a Methodist church or a Baptist church, and it's kind of, older, more historical, you're gonna find a lot of blue hairs, a lot of people who watch Fox News, and it's gonna be the same flavor of people in that church. Conversely, if you go to Elevation Church, you're gonna get a lot of business majors. And I promise that's not a slight, it is what it is. It attracts a certain type of person. Surprisingly, this seemed to be more widespread, more like, diverse. Like, oh, there's the quiet kid, and oh, there's the zany girl, and oh, there's the, interesting, introspective person, and I don't know, it was fun. It was interesting. So I had fun doing that, but then afterwards, one of the Mormon missionaries who I was talking to at the Bible study, we just kept talking, and we kept talking, and then a little group formed around us, and we just kept talking and kept talking. And then before I knew it, all of us were talking on the floor. We were just like sitting around, literally like in the hallway between the foyer and like the outside. We just like plopped a squat in the middle of the floor, and one girl was asking about dating advice, and it was fun. Like I met new friends, and I actually had fun at church. Crazy, wow. So we talked about, dating and everything else for a while, and then we got up, and then the elder, gave me a tour of the whole building, and then we started shooting the breeze about theology and all this, and I was like geeking out, and homeboy was like stupid smart, especially for his age. And so we were talking, and he was talking to me about like G.K. Chesterton, and I was talking to him about like Gnosticism and the Sethians and the Valentinians and the Mandeans, and we were both like geeking out with each other, and it was really, really fun. Oh gosh, dude, as an aside, I love talking about the Bible. I love talking about theology. I love all of that. What ruins it for me is that I often want to talk about all of these things, but then dogma gets in the way and just cock blocks it, and it's really frustrating. If you're a missionary and you're able to just like, kind of shoot the breeze about like weird beliefs or anything without this kind of overarching sense or need to like, okay, but let me just correct all the places where you're wrong and let me just prove that. It goes a long way when you can just, like, oh yeah, that is kind of interesting, isn't it? But yeah, so all of us were having this really awesome conversation, and then we meandered into a different Sunday school room and we started playing piano for like half an hour, and we were like jamming out and harmonizing and duetting, and it was fun. It was really fun. So yeah, overall, maybe the most fun I've ever had in a church. And I love that. I love that I get to, live in this chaotic dichotomy, this incredible tension of saying that probably the worst church experience I've ever had and the best church experience I had were in the same denomination. I absolutely love it. Now, I said this before, and I'll say it again, that this is not a definitive, hey, here are my thoughts on the Mormon church. Here's where I stand. This is me just going and reporting back, how things went today. The reality is that I know people have had very, very, very mixed results with the Mormons. I know that people have had their lives changed, and I know that people have had their lives ruined by this organization. And I want to talk to everyone. I want to hear the wide breadth of those stories. And I know that my missionary friends would be very upset for me to, invite stories like that and listen to sources like that, but they're real and I want to hear them. And I know that some of my ex-Mormon friends are going to be kind of upset that I'm here, parading around, talking about how excited I am that I had a good day at this church. Take all of it with a healthy beat, right? This is a singular moment in time, and I want to just celebrate this for what it was. I am consistently investigating these churches. I am consistently trying to go deeper, but I'm not just going to, wait until I've arrived at a conclusion. I want to show y'all my process, my ups and downs, my ins and outs. That sounded really weird. Don't go inside me. Ugh. I'm sure that this is not the most interesting part of the Mormon faith. And I know that there's a lot to talk about here, but for today, I just wanted to celebrate a little win for my LDS friends and say that this was really cool. All right, let's talk about some big takeaways here, because there's a few. One is going to be the way that I think the Mormon wards, I feel like there's an image problem. I don't know if I'll be able to articulate this, but I'll try. When you go to an Orthodox church or when you go to a Coptic church, there's all this imagery around you to remind you, hey, this is really, really, really old. And it kind of takes you out of whatever American suburb you're in, and it transports you back to the first century. It's a really cool experience, and you're just mesmerized by all of this imagery that makes you feel like you're walking through an anachronism. The Mormon churches that I've been to fail to do that on a fundamental level, because you walk into a normal church and it doesn't make you feel like it's pushing forward. If you really wanted to stretch it, you could say that like non-denominational churches, they're all about, looking forward. It's all, cool new techno doodads and fog machines and lights and lasers. And then with more traditional churches, it's about sending you back into the time of Christ or, the earliest centuries of the church. But with the Mormon church, it fails to send you back to the first few centuries of the church. It fails to send you to the first century in America, where Jesus Christ allegedly had a second ministry. And it even fails to send you back to the 1800s, where Joseph Smith had his ministry. Frankly, it's like you go into a Mormon ward and it just feels like you're in the 70s or almost in like a weird limbo. Now, if I were y'all, if I were a missionary and I were trying to, entice and arouse the suspicion of the general public, I would really lean into the temples, because everything cool about Mormonism happens in the temples. I know that Protestants are really like aghast and, disgusted by some of the practices in the temple. And I don't know all of them. I know that there are some that are much less savory than others. But like, baptism for the dead, I think that's cool. The obsession that Mormons have with genealogies, I think that's cool. Maybe this is another weird aside. But whenever people would like pray, there's a lot of prayers like, hey, let's bless the food, let's pray over the ice cream, let's bless this gathering. Whenever people would volunteer to pray, they would often pray with these and thous and thys. And that's kind of a very interesting thing, right? So the Bible was written in Greek and Hebrew and a tiny bit of Aramaic. And, for us as English speakers, the book has been translated and it keeps being retranslated. So there's a billion translations of the Bible into English. But for Mormons, the language has been codified into King Jamesian English through the Book of Mormon. So when Homeboy is praying and he prays something like, "And Lord, please pour out thy mercies," it's anachronistic, but I think like in this community, the language has kind of been like frozen in place by the Book of Mormon. I don't know, it's just an interesting tidbit. My hunch is that a similar thing has probably happened with Arabic and the Quran in the Middle East, but I'm not a philologist and I don't know for sure. And 19-year-old Jared is very disappointed that I'm not a philologist. Sorry, man, just didn't have the mind for it. The other thing that I'll say is that a lot of the most fascinating parts of LDS theology are parts that they kind of shy away from. In the sermon, there was a very brief mention about God the Mother. And my ears perked up and I was like, hold up, rewind. I want to go back to that. Tell me more about that. And, I'm intrigued by that. But I feel like the missionaries and all the other people there are kind of trained to skirt around some of the more cosmic elements of LDS theology, which bums me out because it's what makes y'all unique and interesting, and I want to hear about it. And some of them are like, sacred mysteries or whatever that I, as an outsider, am not supposed to know, I think. But your boy's got a curious mind and he wants to know. I want to talk about the missionaries though, because I really like Mormon missionaries. And I like them primarily because I used to be a missionary. Sort of. I can't say that I was ever like a bona fide missionary, but I was doing street evangelism and door-to-door evangelism for a little while there. And it's one of those things, man, where it's like you sign yourself up for all the bullcrap that you receive from people, but it still is like you're doing the thing that you think is right, and then, somebody calls you a name or spits on you or like slams the door in your face, and it's a bummer. It ruins your day. So whenever I meet Mormon missionaries, I just love to hear their stories because they have insane stories. I want to say I was talking to one Mormon missionary and she was just casually like, "Oh yeah, like a couple months ago, I was like praying with a guy and then he pulled a knife out on me." Strip away the religious element and it's like these people are going and having like really crazy, deep heart-to-hearts with just whoever the hell they find. And that's their job for either, 18 months for women or 2 years for men. It's crazy. So they tend to walk away from all of this just with really interesting stories. And I love talking to them. I've probably met with the missionaries maybe 10 times by now, over the course of many, many years. As an aside, the very first time I met with the Mormon missionaries was when I was still in seminary. Oh, and your boy was a heresy hunter. So I met with these Mormon missionaries, two young, sweet, innocent girls. They were about 20, I was about 20, and so, we had a battle of the wits, a battle of the spiritual interpretations of the Bible. I met with these women 3 times, and the first 2 times I was just listening. I was just nodding and, taking in as much as I could. But this whole time I was just, packing up my theological arsenal ready for this full frontal assault so I could shoot down every single one of their arguments and prove to them that Joseph Smith was a false prophet. And I'm such a bastard. I remember this so vividly. We were sitting in Chick-fil-A during our 3rd visit, and then I finally felt like, yeah, okay, I've let them talk enough. Now I'm going to share with them my arguments. And so I gave them kind of like a counter-apologetic to all of their arguments that they were making. And I straight up made this young missionary cry in the middle of Chick-fil-A. And I felt so bad about it because I think it like genuinely rattled her. Like she hadn't thought of some of these arguments. Ah, gosh, it's so cringy because we were both, just super earnest young missionaries trying to convert each other. And so, she starts crying and I put my hand on the table and I'm like, "Stacy, I just want you to know, I don't want you to leave Jesus. I just want you to come to the knowledge of the true Jesus." And she was, appreciative and, gave some like modest pushback, but was grateful and then asked to take a selfie. And yeah, man, that was my early 20s. Wild times. I made a Mormon missionary cry in Chick-fil-A. Thankfully, that was the last Mormon missionary that I've made cry, and hopefully it will be the last forever. So yeah, that was way back when, and now I don't give the counter argument or the counter apologetic. Now I just sit and listen and smile and I want to learn. I'm not here to convert or deconvert anyone. I just want to learn more. So that's about all I have for this time. And I don't know. I have so much to learn about this incredibly dynamic and confusing religion. And I know that there are a lot of less than savory things to learn about this organization, but For now, I just wanted to celebrate a small win and say thank you to the people who made this a wonderful church experience today. And shout out to my new friends. Y'all are great. My name is Jared. I'm an atheist. This has been Coffee. LDS friends, I'm sorry. Go to church.